Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the Cartoon Pad. I'm flying solo today, and we have a really great guest on. I am dressed right now in a 1920s replica New York Yankees jersey and hat. Moments ago, the Yankees just won the first round of the playoffs. I actually wore this at Comic-Con also, and about 2,000 people who were there dressed as Doctor Who asked me what sports are. So much for that. I just want to do some house cleaning first. I want to thank Van Scott at Gag Recap for giving a shout out to our podcast. To get his subscription for his newsletter, go to gagrecap.com. Also, tonight's sponsor is inkspill.com, the CNN of New Yorker cartoons. And also I want to thank Patchouli Joe's Books for making our book Elements of Stress a staff pick over there in Dayton, Texas. Their website is Patchouli, I don't know if that's the way it's spelled, Patchouli joesbooks.com, and that's spelled PATCHOULIJOESBOOKS.com. So let's move on to our guest, one of the founders of Addams Fest. What is Addams Fest? Well, we're going to find out. Ron MacCloskey is a producer, performer, and writer and presenter of the award-winning TV show Classic Movies with Ronald MacCloskey. Sorry, Ron. He also created a game show and a children's book called We Don't Feel Like It, and we're going to find out why not. And he's on the podcast because he's also the curator of Frankenstein artwork, displaying artwork from artists all around the world who depict the monster Frankenstein in their art. Welcome to the show, Ron.
Thank you, Bob. Now, I can even start off with baseball, and we'll tie it back into cartooning. You ready?
Go ahead.
My dad played professional baseball. He was a pitcher in the minor leagues, and he played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And we had for years the three figures of the catcher and the umpire and the batter, if you recall, from Norman Rockwell. Do you remember Norman Rockwell do that drawing?
Yeah, I was at the museum not long ago, and I don't think it's on display, but I know that the painting.
Right. Well, they actually made figures out of it.
Oh,
and
okay.
I had those, and I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to them. But boy, if I had those, I'd probably bet they'd be worth a lot of money. And then also in the course of my life, I had a chance to meet the wonderful cartoonist, and I hope you're going to know who this is, Bill Gallo.
No, I love Bill Gallo. Sure. I mean, to me, sports was all about Monday morning, hearing what Dick Young wrote about the weekend's events.
Right.
And I loved his column. And then Bill Gallo's interpretation of it in an illustration. He was doing editorial style cartoons, but all sports themed. I loved him. We met a long time ago. Of course, he's passed away a long time ago. And that's the job I wanted. I would love to work for the New York Daily News. I wound up doing their editorial cartoons, but that's not the same as doing work in the sports section. That's really what I wanted.
Yeah. Now, I'm guessing Bill Gallo, that had to be a real narrow expertise. I mean, were there a lot of people doing that across the country? Because all I know is Bill Gallo because I grew up in the New York area.
Yeah, no, there was very few people who were doing, especially doing sports editorials. He was really, of course, alone, I think. I mean, there was just some people came and went. There was a cartoon strip called Tank McCarran or Tank something.
Okay.
It was a sports cartoon. I just can't remember. It's decades ago, but I have a faint memory of that. But yeah, the New York Daily News was a big part of my growing up. And, you know, you do remember Dick Young, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I definitely remember seeing that name. It's funny, when my dad was alive, he used to come home with 3 newspapers every day. the Star Ledger, which is in New Jersey, the Post, and the Daily News.
And how was
each of them.
How was it growing up with a dad who was a baseball player?
Well, it wasn't easy because the thing that made it even more difficult is my brother was a gifted athlete. So my brother and my father were both excellent in sports, and I was okay. And you can't be okay if you have those two guys ahead of you. In fact, I'm very honored that next month both of them are going to be inducted into the Westfield Athletic Hall of Fame on the
Oh,
same
wow.
night as a father and son. So that's really special.
Congratulations. So will you be speaking?
I'm sorry?
Will you be speaking at the
Yeah,
event?
well, as a matter of fact, I'm now going to have to speak for both of them. Unfortunately, from out of the blue, my brother passed away 4 months ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, the good news is he knew about it. He knew they had made it. He knew they were going to be in the Hall of Fame. So that made me feel very, very special that they were able to do that. And I also ended up getting a picture of my dad, who played the minors, like I said, into the Hall of Fame. The picture is very unusual. It's 3 foot long, and it's the entire team in center field. And the guy at either end, I do a whole trivia of whether it's the same guy or brothers, and it's the same guy, because back then they used to do trick photography, where the camera actually moved on a tripod, moved from one end to the other. And once they passed the first guy, they said, "Okay, Charlie, start running," and he ran to the other end. But here's the great thing, though, Bob. He didn't run behind the cameraman. He ran behind the team players. And you can actually see a blur. And that's why the Hall of Fame thought it was such a great photo. So it's in the Hall of Fame. And when you donate something to the Hall of Fame, they can't pay you, but they give you a lifetime pass. So that's special, yeah.
I'm supposed to go up there for a project I'm working on. I'm writing about museums. So
Okay.
I'm going to check out that museum as it's on my bucket list. Now,
Wait. So you're saying you've never been there?
no, I haven't.
Oh my goodness. So you got to go. What about the Yogi Berra Museum? Have you been there?
No, and I have a whole bunch of Yogi Berra books because I used to work alongside a guy you might know,
Yeah.
Alan St. John.
Sounds
Alan St. John was a sports writer. He wrote for the New York Times, but mostly for the Village Voice.
okay.
And he was kind of he also had a slant of humor. And I think we're bringing up guys who a lot of people are not going to know, but they were the influences and sort of the trailblazers for people today. I feel like, for instance, Dick Young is the reason why we had Mike and the Mad Dog.
Oh, okay.
Chris Russo, I think's
Right.
attitude comes from that column where he could be, very confrontational,
Right.
be very judgmental and just say anything was on his mind.
Right. Well, the reason why I ended up meeting Bill Gallo, he ended up doing a sports cartoon where he had the New York Yankees as the Frankenstein monster. And I believe this was 1970 when the team was terrible. and the coach is there trying to revive the monsters. So, implying he's trying to revive the team.
And so your interest in Frankenstein starts when?
Well, 60 years ago. I was 7 years old. It was 1962. I got my first monster model, which was the Frankenstein model from Aurora. And back then, I don't know, we may be the same age, but I'm probably older. But back then you had the monster magazines, Famous Monsters of Filmland. You had the models in the toy stores. And then you had the movies late at night. And for me, again, in the New York area, I grew up with John Zachary, who I think was just the best, just the greatest.
Well, for me, my introduction to Frankenstein was Abbott and Costello.
Oh,
And those things like, Saturday and Sunday morning, watching a TV set that's controlled by my dad, and he's
Right.
watching the Bowery Boys and those guys. And it's kind of limited what I could watch. So, but did you have anyone in your family in show business that they influenced you into that avenue or?
well, I think my mother more or less was the one. My brother, loved sports and just wanted to be in sports. My dad, I think, eventually wanted to be a sportscaster, but never made it. So they kind of as I got older, he then focused on me and my career, and that was nice that he took an interest in show business. I just thought every kid grew up and wanted to be in show business and wanted to entertain people and make movies and TV shows and draw. I first started out as cartoonist. That was really my first goal. Walt Disney, Charles Schulz, these were the people I looked at. I drew cartoons in the high school newspaper, and that's what I wanted to do. So that was my first thought of entertaining people. And then I decided to do stand-up comedy. So I became my own cartoon character and then did my jokes by myself.
And so when did you start trying stand-up?
Oh, probably, around 15, 16 or whatever. I ended up being a guest star on a radio program. And again, in the New York area, if you knew it was called The Ted Brown Show. Ted Brown was on WNEWAM. And he actually invited me. He says, if you think you're funny, you think you can have talent, write me in and you'll be my Saturday morning star. And he picked me. And I went on and it was great. I had a great time.
Well, that's fantastic. And then you started collecting cartoons about Frankenstein, but you yourself, I'm sure, pitched Frankenstein cartoons. Did you try different markets with your work at all, or?
Well, no, I was okay, but I was never, some of these people I see are just phenomenal in the way they can draw things. I was okay. I have this nice drawing that I did when I was in high school, and that was nice, but I never got to that point because, again, as the older I got, but you know what, do you remember, now this is when I'm just remembering this. Do you remember when you used to buy a book of matches, and if you opened it up, it says, if you can draw this leprechaun, maybe you have talent. Do you remember this?
Sure. Yeah, it was in Boy's Life and everything, where you draw a turtle or a pirate, and then you'd sit by the mailbox waiting to find out if you were going to be recruited into the movies to do animation.
Right. And I actually got far enough where somebody came to the house and they talked to my parents.
You're the one person I've heard have that happen, because in my block, all the kids did the same thing. And this would have been around 6th or 7th grade.
Right.
And everyone would talk about, what was going to happen, whatever. I didn't really try because I kind of had, I thought it was all fake. I thought it was one of the first, like the spams we get now.
No, I agree. And I think after the guy left, my parents thought the same thing. This is just a way for this guy to make money. Maybe he's talented, maybe he's not, but we just don't have the money to do this. So nothing ever happened. But
there were TV shows back then too. How to draw. There was a guy, and I can't think of his name, but he had a goatee. He was a kind of a scary looking guy who used to teach drawing on TV. I'm pretty sure it was PBS.
I think, was his name John Nagy?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember him. And
then you could buy his stuff, you could buy his kits. And just like Bob Ross did many years later, he had a line of materials you could purchase that were endorsed by him.
Right.
If you used his stuff, you were going to be able to draw the facial expressions of people and everything would become much easier.
I also remember, and I sent away for this in the mail from Disney. They sent me like 2 or 3 cardboard. They were like a menu, and it showed you how to draw Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. And it actually went from, nothing, a stick figure to whatever. Now, do you recall those at all?
Yeah, sure. But only vaguely. That's a little bit, this is now, we've been really young.
Yeah.
That's before how to draw the turtle and the pirate.
Right. But it was so great that I got something for Disney. I was all excited. I thought it was just so wonderful. But so it's kind of in my bones.
Yeah, there's sort of a connection between that, the magic of it, and then there's the show business of Charles Addams. Now, you were a co-founder of ADDAMSFEST. Could you share a little bit what that was about for people who don't know too, where they go to it?
Yeah, well, again, it just all made sense with my background. So here I love drawing, and I loved Frankenstein and monster movies. And I was well aware of Addams and well aware of the Addams family. But it was kind of like a rumor when I was a kid that maybe he grew up here or not. There was like no definite thing saying, yeah, that was his house. He did this, he did that. And this went on for years. And eventually it took until 1991. And now this was when the Paramount film came out with Raul Julia and Angelica Houston. So I went to the township and I said, it is a fact he grew up here, because I went to the library to research. Are we going to do anything? They said no. So on my own, I created a scholarship in his name, the Charles Addams Art Scholarship. And I had his house declared a historic landmark, and there's a plaque on the house. And then it took 5 years ago for the township of Westfield to not only recognize what I'm doing, but also then join in. And so now this Addams Fest, it's all month long, but the big focus is the end of October. And they have film fest, they have art contest, and all the store windows they allow artists to come up with their own version of the Addams family. And it's great. It really is wonderful.
Now, is the house looks like something from one of his cartoons? Is it like have a horror theme to it, or it's just a regular house?
His house that he grew up in was a regular house. However, where he lived and where the high school was, every day for 4 years, he had to walk by another house. And that house looks like the Addams family. It's black and white. It's got the mansard roof. And I believe that that's the one. Although since that time, there's been 6 buildings that claim they are the Addams family house. Here's something somebody told me, and I can't believe I did not notice this until now. But every time Addams drew the Addams family house, it was different. He never did it exactly the same. He changed things here or there. So it means there were several really different houses. But of course, we all recall the one from the Addams Family TV show.
Yeah. Well, he had a keen eye for architecture. It's included in so many cartoons where he was able to tap into his encyclopedia mind. And of course, he obviously referenced everything very well. Ron, you and me, I think, ran into each other at the annual parties up in Long Island, where Bunny hosts would throw a party.
Yeah.
And every time I drove up that way to attend the party with Sam Gross riding shotgun, I would drive him. We would be about a mile away from Bunny's house, and we would pass this Gothic looking house on the left-hand side. And Sam would always point out that house was often included in Charlie's cartoons. Sam called him Charlie because they knew each other. And Sam, when he first broke into the New Yorker, he did so by selling gags to Charles Addams.
Oh, that's great.
So he knew a lot about Charles Addams' work, and he was able to identify that particular house. And it did look right out of a Charles Addams cartoon, with the very special detailing along the roof rim with spokes, and a lot of ornate details and Gothic looking figures on the corner and the cornerstones and things like that.
Yeah, from what I understand, Addams did take architectural courses. And the thing that can illustrate that the best is when he draws things from the perspective. You can actually see the perspective. I think one of his most famous cartoons is the one where the Christmas carolers are down below, and then Lurch and Morticia and Gomez are about to pour the oil. That perspective is amazing. I mean, he's drawing it like it's a drone above the house looking downward. And it's remarkable.
As a cartoonist, what I learned from that is his commitment to the joke. He is all in. He doesn't cut corners. And I don't think that every cartoon needs to have corner to corner, full-blown detail. And now I'm getting a little bit in the weeds here. I'm speaking to some of the listeners who are cartoonists, is that by doing that, you're kind of making nothing the priority. And you do want to make something the priority, but he had the skill to do that using lights and darks. He would use, a rich range of grays to add very detailed backgrounds, and then make your eye go to certain points of the focal points by using, black points and things like that told you where to be looking first. But he was all in.
Yeah, he used it. He's famous for saying the best caption to a cartoon is no caption, meaning he wanted you to look at the cartoon, and he wanted you to hopefully see 2 or 3 things going on instead of just one thing. So and you're right about it's black and white. I mean, people don't realize that, when films started being produced in the 30s and 40s, they took such pains to make sure that that black and white photography looked a certain way. And you're right. I believe he did the same thing. He was almost like a camera eye looking at that cartoon to have that nuance between the gray and the black and whatever. And he was just wonderful in it. He was a master.
Yeah, I always thought the TV show was actually superior than the movie, because the movie was color and something was lost that the TV show captured. The TV show I thought was a masterpiece.
Well, it came along at the right time, and the casting was impeccable. As far as I know, it started with Aston first. He was the first one cast in the TV show. And then they got everybody after that. And Morticia was real difficult to cast. And then they finally found Carolyn Jones, who, in retrospect, was just perfect.
No, I assume that your favorite though was the Munsters.
No,
really? Because that's Frankenstein.
No, I know that. It just, to me, it was a little bit too goofy.
It was, to me, it was funnier.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. I mean, even the beginning, the song was catchy, and having a dragon in the staircase, and you got me on that. There was something a little too creepy about having a hand in a box and that cousin it.
Right. Well, I'll give you a great trivia question. So Vic Mizzy is probably very famous for writing the Addams Family theme song. He also wrote Green Acres. But the guy that wrote the Munsters theme song, again, which was just music, was the father of filmmaker Frank Marshall. And Frank Marshall created Amblin with Steven Spielberg. And Frank Marshall was in the last movie that Karloff ever made called Targets.
We've lost half the audience. Okay, but we got to touch on, you just mentioned my favorite show, maybe the funniest show, is Green Acres.
Oh, okay.
I encourage everyone to revisit that, which is on TV Land. And that show really is something else.
Oh, it's wonderful because they played it so straight. I mean, just very funny acting. They sometimes even made fun of themselves. I mean, they were aware they were shooting a show. They would have fun with the credits. They would have just great, funny stuff.
Yeah. What's funny is that, a lot of TV shows now, they're building on the jokes. Everything is just driven by the jokes. Whereas back then, the story itself was funny, just a premise. And then the jokes just came. For instance, having Arnold the Pig get drafted to the Army, right there kind of just plays itself. You don't need to have even many jokes. It's just going to happen.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, here's something I think we should talk about, which I know we didn't plan on, but let's talk about famous cartoons or cartoon strips that were then turned into movies or TV shows.
It's a great idea, but I'm not going to be very good at this, but you're going to be in the lead.
Well, first of all, you have Dennis the Menace, right?
Oh, true. Obvious, right?
Great stuff. Blondie.
Oh, you're right. Right. Okay.
Yeah, Blondie. Now, I want to say there was a Beetle Bailey for a while, but I don't know about Beetle Bailey. Do you know about Beetle Bailey?
No, and see, I'm not really good at this. I'm going through my memory. I'm thinking of all Family Circus. These are the cartoons I grew up with, but there wasn't anything from them. Of course, where I grew up is a big diet of The Odd Couple, F Troop. And so I'm going through those and thinking, were they ever a cartoon strip? And I can't think of any.
What about the TV series? It only lasted a year, I think, that was created by Thurber.
Oh, see, that's before my time, but yes, I know of it existing. True. But
Yes.
I don't know the name of that. Do you recall?
I want to say it had life in the title.
I know what life or something, the life of.
Yes. Yeah. And William Wyndon, that's a great name. William Wyndon played Thurber in that.
I've seen clips of it and he was very good at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily date well. Certain things that do, like for instance, F Troop, for instance, really doesn't, it dates poorly political correctness.
Right.
But the actual jokes and the acting and stuff with Ken Berry, he actually looks contemporary. He could pass for now. Yeah.
I had the good fortune to work with Larry Storch several times in Ocean City, New Jersey, and he was a wonderful guy. He just passed away recently, but wonderful performer.
And he was
I think he did a lot of voiceover stuff, right?
I don't know about that, but let's explain who he is on F Troop. He was the shorter guy who was the second banana, and he really was the whole show. He had this really high energy, and Ron, you have me down a rabbit hole because now I'm trying to go through everything and think. Okay. Was McHale's Navy a comic strip?
No.
No.
Navy, no.
What else you're going to have to help with this because I can't think of any.
Oh, you mean of other shows that were turned into movies?
Yeah,
obviously. Well, the other one was Dick Tracy.
Oh, no, that was a movie, and I love that movie.
Right, but no, I believe it was a TV series in the 50s. Didn't last that long, but yeah, I think it was a TV
I would never have known that.
And then, of course, you have Superman.
No, okay.
Right, so Superman qualifies. And then, of course, you had Batman.
Yeah, the superhero thing is a whole different thing.
Well, there were cartoons that were turned into TV shows.
Absolutely. Yep. I was always into the humor section. The Superman, the Batmans is something I never really, even as a kid, I thought it was kind of silly that this guy was jumping out the window.
Well, I'll tell you what, it really, for me, I mean, it was full color. And to me, the gimmick was, which I thought was wonderful, it came on twice a week. So they used to play them in cliffhangers, where the first half hour would end with Batman and Robin about to be killed on a Tuesday. Yeah. And then Thursday they'd come back and, of course, get out of it.
Yeah. You reminded me of another cartoon strip that became a TV show that had the same problem I had with Superman, which was Tarzan.
Oh,
and the fact that the lead kept on changing totally ruined it for me in the same way that happened with Bewitched. When they had a new Darren, it was like, come on, we're right here. You're doing that right in front of us. And Tarzan had like 5 different leads.
Yeah.
Now, was the Lone Ranger a cartoon strip ever? Was that
I see. Now I'm going to guess it was. I believe the history of that is it was on radio first, became real popular, and in fact, I think Bud Collyer, who was a game show host, was the original voice of the Lone Ranger, and then of course it went to television. But I'm almost sure. I bet you your audience would know whether it also was a comic strip for a while.
Yeah. Well, my audience, I think, is mostly gag cartoons. And I wanted to ask you about your art collection.
Yeah.
Do you have any Charles Addams?
Originals, no. But I do have, he put out 13 books. And of the 13 books, I think I have 4 first editions. And the very first book he put out was called Drawn and Quartered. And the foreword is done by Boris Karloff. He was good friends with Bennett Cerf. And Random House put out the books of Addams cartoons. And in the foreword, Karloff says, "Thank you for having me look like the witch's butler." Now that's a key clue to his cartoons. Do you know what that key is?
No.
Okay. Addams never gave them names in the cartoons.
Ah.
You never say, you never see Gomez says, "Morticia, are you happy?" or "Are you unhappy?" He would just say, "Are you unhappy?" And the same thing with the mother. She would never say, "Wednesday, come here." So yeah, they were not given names until the TV series.
Now, is the reason why you really are not sought after a Charles Addams original because he really didn't include Frankenstein in your collection is really based around Frankenstein, correct?
Yes, yeah, but before we move past that, let me just point out though what I think Addams did do. The first Addams Family cartoon he drew of a vacuum cleaner salesman trying to sell Morticia a vacuum cleaner. And it's funny because the house is all filled with cobwebs. Well, Lurch, the butler standing next to her, big, hulky guy with a full beard. Now, that's not how Lurch looked like eventually, but that's exactly how Boris Karloff looked like in the old dark house. So the first couple of times he drew the butler, he was drawing it like Karloff in that movie. Then
Right.
he drew it like Karloff as the Frankenstein monster. So in a way, Addams was paying tribute more to the actor than to anybody else.
Well, I want to go back to your collection, but I also want to ask you about your documentary because you keep on bringing up Boris. How do you know the Boris Karloff and his family? What was your connection there?
I met Sarah Karloff in 1997. She came to a thing called the Chiller Theater Expo, which is held in New Jersey. I think it's the longest, biggest convention of its kind. And I know the owner who runs it, Kevin Clement, wonderful guy. And so, yeah, I met Sarah, and one of the first things I said to her is, hey, someday I want to make a movie about your dad, because, you know, they've done the biography thing, and that to me were just so cookie cutter, where it's the same story over and over and over again. I said, I want to do something in depth, and she smiled and said, okay, like, you know, I'm never going to do it. It took me 25 years, but I did it. So, yeah, so I purposely picked up a camera and started shooting 25 years ago.
And where can we see this movie now?
Today, as a matter of fact, is the grand premiere of it appearing in Walmart, Amazon, and Best Buy. So you can get online and you can own your own copy. And the full title is Boris Karloff, The Man Behind the Monster. And my film partner in this is Thomas Hamilton. I found him by watching Turner Classic Movies. He did a great biography on Leslie Howard. And it was told through Leslie Howard's daughter, through her eyes. I said, well, that's kind of what I want to do with this. I wanted to have Sarah Karloff talk about her dad. I mean, we ended up going in a slightly different direction. But anyway, that's what got us together. That was 4 years ago. And then it just snowballed. And then eventually it came out last year. It was a big hit. I was so surprised and so happy because, you know, Bob, in this day and age, people can be so cruel. Everybody's a critic, but everybody liked it. So we got crazy, wonderful, great reviews.
Yeah.
And it's been streaming, and now it's available on video.
Did you find that there was a bigger audience for this than you thought?
No, I was hoping that there were thousands, if not more than 1 million people that cared much about Boris Karloff. And again, not only in this country, but in Europe. And that's why I got excited when Thomas Hamilton, who's from London, England, decided to come on board. Because again, he would look at it slightly different than the way I would look at it. And he really knows his stuff. So it turned out great. We ended up being a great combination.
And did you do the festivals in Europe, knowing that they might be more appreciative of cinema history?
Well, unfortunately, because of the timing of getting the film done, getting it released, and it was too difficult. Because again, a lot of these festivals, they want it before anybody else sees it. And we couldn't afford to do that. Once it was done and out, we wanted it out there. So no, but I know Tom is talking to a few people in Europe to talk about getting it at some of the festivals there.
Because I assumed a lot of the festivals have been on hold because of COVID.
Well, that's the other thing. See, that's the other thing. Yeah, for 2 years or 3 years, we were kind of like in hold on who's going to buy this, or more. It was, when are the theaters going to reopen? When are people going to go back to watching movies? So that was a part of the whole thing of trying to get this released. That's why we couldn't release it sooner than 2021. And then, of course, you were hoping that all these studios were backed up and they all want product, so we'd be able to get a good deal. And we ended up signing a deal with the Shout Factory. And the Shout Factory shows a lot of films that are horror-based and close to what we were doing.
Now, I'm curious to know, to get the footage for the documentary, right, did you go to places that are archival film places like MoMA? Or how did you get the old clips?
Well, we had to get a lawyer and a legal firm to get involved to make sure that everything was covered. But no, that's the other thing that was quite time intensive, that, yeah, we had to make sure that everybody approved and everybody said yes you can use our clip, or it's X amount of dollars, and then you can use the clip. There's a term where you can use a clip, and there's like a fine line. In other words, like if I just show a clip from the Body Snatcher, okay, for example, then we would have to pay for it. But we had Sharon Moffat. Sharon Moffat was the little girl in the Body Snatcher. So she's talking about working with Karloff in that film. So that then makes a difference where we then don't have to pay for it.
Because it's in some way using the footage like educationally, like it changes the category of it?
Correct. Because the person that was in the film is talking about that particular scene. It's called fair use. Fair use.
Yeah. And now, how did you find all the footage? How did you know what you wanted to use? Did you go to the, let's say, Broadcasting Museum in New York City, or like I said, there's the Gettysburg. They have the film archives. Right. What did you do?
Well, a combination of all those things. As a matter of fact, the curator from the Paley, it's called the Paley Center in New York City, was actually interviewed for our film. But you're right. But I'll tell you what, though, when I started this back in 1997, you couldn't find anything on his work or whatever, or very limited. Nowadays, it's like every single thing's out there. I don't know how they can do it, but everything is out there. And I think a lot of things are out there that they're not getting permission. They're just showing it. But you go to YouTube, you can find almost anything. And then it comes a lot of variety shows and episodic TV.
Yeah.
I Spy, Wild Wild West, The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. Some great stuff.
Well, Ron, I see a lot of stuff going up and then it gets pulled down.
Well, that's right.
Then it goes back up and gets pulled down.
Right, because some of these studios, I think, now hire people just to see what are people showing. Did you get the rights from us? But I'll tell you what, though, as years go by, more and more studios are just letting these movies lapse and not renewing the rights, because I think it's just too much of trouble to do that. For years, It's a Wonderful Life was in public domain, so everybody used to show that movie because it didn't cost anything, and somebody got smart and got the copyright. So now it's very rarely when you can see that film.
And now there used to be the time limit, but they don't do that anymore, right? Where movies after a certain age is public domain. Now they are all can be copyrighted if someone gets them. Am I right?
Well, no, it's still based on years. So it's based on like 25 years or 40 years or whatever. And studios sign that agreement. And as far as I know, the Library of Congress or whoever keeps track of all this stuff will contact the studio and say, your movie's coming up this year. Do you want to renew the rights? And again, I think they have a whole department that'll say, okay, let's renew this one and this one and this one, but not that one. Yeah. I mean, in a way, I did, talking about this is the reason why Frankenstein is all over the place, because Frankenstein was written in 1818 and there were no copyrights. Anybody can publish Frankenstein. Anybody.
You mean the character is not protected?
Well, the story is not protected, because Mary Shelley wrote it when there were no copyrights. Now, the makeup, the flat head and the scars and the bolts, Universal tries to scare everybody, says, no, we own that and only us, and you can't use that. People still do it, though.
Yeah, I mean, I did a cartoon that's in your collection of Frankenstein in a Hollywood studio, talking to his agent.
Right.
The agent saying something like, Frankie, this is a role you were made for. And I could get sued, right, for using that character. I just went ahead and used it. And that's illegal away.
But now let's examine what you just said. But you just said Frankie. You didn't say Frankenstein. So to me, in a way, you're getting away with it because you're not identifying him as the Frankenstein monster, although it's obvious by the way you drew him.
Yeah.
So there you go, Bob. I just saved you about $50,000.
Maybe, at least. Ron, I'm working on a movie and I needed to look at some of the oldest footage that existed for snowmen.
Okay.
I'm making a holiday special TV special about snowmen.
Oh,
So
great.
I was going to look at these old film archives in a location that they didn't want me to know. So I was driven to it and secretly brought to a location in the middle of Pennsylvania.
Oh, come
And it
on.
was just like the beginning of Batman. We went through a dirt road and we
Wow.
went through some back roads with no identity. And then
Okay.
they had a sort of barricade that fell forward that we could drive over. And then we went into like a tunnel. And then we wound up going to the complex in which housed thousands of films that were
Wow.
owned by famous people. And you know this place, but you might not know where it is.
Yeah.
But this place has the collections of Martin Scorsese and
Wow.
Spielberg. And this is where they keep it, in this enormous sort of underground complex that's refrigerated to protect the film.
Well, I was just going to ask about the temperature, right? The
Yeah,
temperature.
it's really cold. It was like going into Fairway to buy brie. You know, all of a sudden it's like really cold. You wear a coat, and there
Wow.
then once I was there, everyone was super friendly. Once
Right.
they realized I could never find my way back there.
Right.
So I
Right.
went there and they sat me down and we watched a 1908 movie called The Snowman. And it lasted just 4 minutes. And of course, it was a silent movie.
Right.
And they've shown me that and some other silent movies, some of the earliest ones ever. And it was fascinating. And I thought maybe you also had a similar experience where you went to that archive, because these movies exist. You just have to find them. I did go to Gettysburg in the fall. This fall I went there, and that place is amazing. I can't believe the scope of it is just like amazing how many films they have, hundreds of thousands of everything ever filmed.
Wow. Well, I came close. I met a guy named Al Detlef. I don't know if you know that name, but apparently he owned the only copy of Thomas Edison's Frankenstein, made in 1910. And everybody courted him and thought he was going to donate the film to AFI or somebody, but he never did. You know, they flew him out, they had dinner and whatever, and he just loved everything. I even had a chance to meet him once, and he never gave the film to anybody.
But did he screen it? Did he have a show, have a screening?
Yeah, it's only 10 minutes long, and eventually he died, and then somehow somebody got it. So, but yeah, but he would not allow anyone to show it unless he was credited for the making of that film.
And now, did they make any copies of this one copy? Could you do that?
Yeah, eventually they did. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Here's the video I'm looking for. I'm saying specifically video, I think, or it could be on film tape. Karloff did Arsenic and Old Lace 3 times on television. The one I am looking for is the one he made with Orson Bean as Mortimer, Helen Hayes as one of the sisters, but it had Peter Lorre and Boris Karloff in the 2 roles. And I can't find it. And it was done on television and aired only once.
Huh.
So it was made in 55, I think.
Now, was there a Frankenstein club out there where you guys get together once a year and trade notes and talk?
When I was a kid, we used to have Frankenstein clubs. Yeah.
No, I'm asking because, like Sherlock Holmes, there's a society of all these experts, these gentlemen scholars. And you're the only person I know who's a Frankenstein scholar.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. In fact, I met one of these guys that were the the scholars of Sherlock Holmes. No, I mean, again, well, nowadays, you go online, there's, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 dozen sites. One's called Frankenstein Forever. One is called The Cabinet of Frankenstein. And, one's called Universal Monsters. And everybody's got their own take. I know because of COVID, because of money, Universal had to postpone building an entire land in Orlando just dedicated to their monsters. And I don't know what happened to that plan now, but they were going to do that. They were going to make a brand. In fact, this is so big, it can't even be a part of Universal Studios. They bought a whole separate tract of land. And like Disney World, where they have, all different sections, one section was going to be dedicated just to the Universal monsters.
There was a new museum that opened up in Los Angeles. I was there in August. The Academy, that's on the corner opposite the Pearson Automobile Museum.
Okay.
And it's all old films as well as new films. And they have a big section on props and monsters. They have the original Jaws shark and things like that. And they have Wizard of Oz, and they have things with Dracula and everything else like that. But if you get a chance, you definitely want to check that out and make your presence known. And you should be hired as one of the curators.
Well, they had a museum in Salem, Massachusetts, that was called the Boris Karloff Museum. But this was like over 20 years ago, so I don't know where it is now. But getting back to Frankenstein and cartoons, you can't believe how often the Frankenstein monster has been used in political cartoons over and over again. Are you familiar with Mike Peters?
I've met him. He also does Mother Goose.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I assume you meant Mike Peters, though, the editorial cartoons. I didn't know if you knew he also did non-political cartoons as well.
Right. No, but the Mike Peters I'm talking about is Mother Goose and Grimm.
Yep.
That panel, right. Well, for a while, he was, to me, in my opinion, the most prolific cartoonist of Frankenstein.
Yep.
I mean, so many cartoons. And now there's other guys that are doing cartoons as well.
Mike's prolific in general, and Mike does do editorial political cartoons as well. And he also has people working with him. He's got like 3 or 4 guys who are doing cartoons, gags, inking. So he's like a little cottage industry. So
yeah, well, he's great. He's great.
Yeah, he's very friendly, very nice guy. I met him years ago before the pandemic, and a very talented guy. I want to ask you about the Frankie Award. Now, how can I go about winning one of those?
Well, you have to pay me.
Okay, step one.
Well, my vision was every year I wanted to give out a different Frankie to a different person deserving of a Frankie. It didn't go that way. I've only given out about 10 at this point. But, I gave it out to people that I think cared about the Frankenstein monster and want to continue telling the story. So I gave it to people like Sarah Karloff. I gave it to Bela Lugosi Jr. because of what his father did with Igor, which I think was just phenomenal. I gave it to the family of Glenn Strange because of what he did, and Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. And the last person I gave it to was Guillermo del Toro, who loved it and said he was going to put it next to his Oscar.
You see what you did here? You made it more important than the Oscar because you're giving it out so seldom.
Exactly.
You're making it more rare.
There you go. There you go.
I see what you're doing. That's very good.
Yeah. And I was talking to somebody the other day about Guillermo del Toro. His dream is to make Frankenstein. And I don't know whether it's good that he does that or he just keeps it a dream and never does it.
Is there anybody else attached to the project? Is there a director who has been mentioned, or it's just his intention to play Frankenstein?
No. His intention to make the movie.
To make the movie. Yeah.
Direct it, write it, cast it. Yeah.
Are there any rumors of a Frankenstein being made?
No, but there's more and more heat going on with remaking these classic films. I mean, The Invisible Man was remade a couple of years ago, and I thought it was very well done. Now there's a remake of The Wolfman. That's going to be redone. And they're talking all the time about remaking either Frankenstein or The Bride of Frankenstein.
Yep. Well, do you like Mel Brooks's version of Frankenstein? Is that, to you, the pinnacle?
I didn't at first. I thought it was a little, I think he went too far. But as years went by, I got better, and more people ended up loving it. And I put it right up there with Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, where it combined comedy and yet paying tribute to those old monsters.
I,
So
I think it's a great movie because of the lighting and the way he gave so much attention to making it feel like a classic. The
yes,
movie, to me, without any sound and without the jokes, I think it was just so well edited, and the cinematography on it was up there in the same way like Life of Brian. Life of Brian is, they build a foundation of realism. You really feel like you're back there. And the same thing with Frankenstein. You really believe you're set there. So he kind of sets the plate well.
absolutely. And the music was done by John Morris, and he
Yes.
was wonderful. That music is just great.
Oh, it's perfect. To me, that was a detail that's what makes it. I mean, that whole movie could be just ridiculous without the right music. It's the
Yes.
music. And I like it because also, if you take, let's say, 39 Steps,
Mhm.
that's a little too scary. Like if he had done that, that's like doing it too much. So to me, it was a nice in between. It was a little bit more user friendly.
Yeah, yeah, it
And
was.
I love Mel's discussion that it's well known, his decision to make it black and white. And obviously he made the right decision.
Right. The only thing sometimes gets me a little annoyed is I don't think Gene Wilder gets enough credit, because it really was Gene's story. Gene was writing it as they were making Blazing Saddles.
What do you mean it was Gene's story? He wrote the screenplay?
Gene Wilder, yeah, it was his story from the beginning.
Boy, I didn't know that.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's called Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein, and Gene Wilder, I don't think, got the credit that he should have.
Well, he's brilliant. I love him and everything. And what did you think of the pivotal scene in which they're on stage together, Frankenstein and the doctor dancing vaudeville?
Well, the story is that Gene Wilder had a fight for that scene. Mel Brooks did not want to put it in.
I know. That's why I'm bringing it up. That's a key thing. There was a lot of arguments with this movie. Going black and white, for instance, was something the studio did not go along with.
Correct.
He insisted. But that scene, the Gene Wilder scene, Mel was not on board with.
Right.
He felt it was tipping his hand too much. Yeah. And this kind of comes back to cartooning, as cartoonists think about what's pushing the envelope and what's ruining the joke, stepping on the joke. Right. And I at first thought that it was all off, but in retrospect, looking back at it now, I think it's perfect.
Oh, you're right. It is. And at one point, when Mel Brooks finally said, "Okay, we'll do it," Gene said to him, why did you fight me so long on this?" He said, "I just wanted to see how much you wanted to do it." So that was the answer.
And of course, it was well done. Anything works if it's done well. Yeah. And they pulled it off. It was just the right of everything. It was the right amount of humor, the right length of time. They didn't drag it on too long. It was just right.
Yeah, yeah. And the ironic thing is the same agent for Marty Feldman was the same agent for Peter Boyle.
Peter Boyle, John Lennon's best friend.
No, well, I don't know about best friend, but yeah, they were friends. Yes.
I read a couple of places how tight they were.
Oh, okay.
Because when he was holed up in the Dakota, he had gone years without doing much socializing when he came back from LA, and his neighbor was Peter Boyle.
Oh, okay.
And Peter Boyle, for those who don't know, was in Young Frankenstein. You wouldn't recognize him, but you would know him as Ray Romano's dad.
Right.
So a lot of people know him from Everyone Loves Raymond.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, he actually did a Halloween episode on Everybody Loves Raymond, and Peter Boyle comes in dressed as the Frankenstein monster.
That was great.
Yeah.
An little inside baseball.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Ron, I've kept you a long time, but I do want to go back to your cartoon collection before I say goodbye. Tell me some of your favorite cartoons in your collection, some cartoons that for you are sort of the highlights, because I'm going to try to post maybe one or two online for people to enjoy too.
Okay. Yeah, I met an artist years ago named Paul Garner. Paul is in England. And I had the opportunity to write a story about the Addams family in Famous Monsters of Filmland. If you recall, they brought it back for a while. So Famous Monsters was back. I wrote a story about the Addams family, and the artist that drew the cover, which was a wonderful caricature of the Addams family. So when I met him, online, I just said, I'm doing this Frankenstein thing. He drew the most wonderful cartoon of Elvis Presley and Priscilla as Frankenstein and the Frankenstein monster. And it is just gorgeous. And I attended one of these, shows where they were having old stars come out, and Priscilla Presley was there.
Yeah.
So I brought a copy of the cartoon with me. And, when you stop and you talk to these people, they run away. Do you want a T-shirt? Do you want a jacket? Do you want this? Do you want that? I said, no, I'm here to give something to her. Well, give something to her. Anyway, I got to the front of the line. I showed her the cartoon. She couldn't believe it. She just loved it so much. Right away, we had pictures taken. She signed it for me. So,
that's
yes,
great.
so that's one of my favorites. So Paul Garner from England, who did Elvis and Priscilla as the Frankenstein monster.
How often do you get a chance to exhibit some of your collection?
Every year, every October, I try to find some place to make sure that everybody can see this collection. This year,
let's talk about where we could see it this year.
Okay, this year it's on Facebook. It's on a page I specifically created called Ronnie Mac Mary Shelley. So RONNIEMAC, and then Mary Shelley. And you can see all the work that I've collected for this year. I have almost all of them up. Next Saturday, I'm going to complete the list. And then I'm going to have what I call the top 3 of the collection. And already I'm talking about next year doing it somewhere else in the country.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to spell your name so people can find you on Facebook and they can follow you as well. The last name is spelled MacCloskey.
Correct. And the second C is capitalized. And I always go by just my first name, Ron, R-O-N. So Ron MacCloskey. You will find.
Yeah, you have a website that I was enjoying. Right.
Good.
And I mean, are you on Instagram?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. So people can follow you there, and that's great. So yeah, for my fans, try posting some cartoons, some gag cartoons. Let's see some of your one panel, your single panel cartoons. I'd love to see some of the Frankenstein cartoons you have in your collection. And
if you go to that site, you'll see them.
You'll see them there. Okay.
And I've been doing this now, Bob, for 7 years, and I show 52 cartoons every year. So that means I have now like 350 to 400 images from artists from all around the world, and it's just great.
Is there one that you've been seeking after you haven't gotten your hands on yet that's sort of your holy grail?
No, but here's the fun thing, though. Nowadays, again, you go on Facebook and somebody eventually post another Frankenstein cartoon. So I immediately take it, save it, and then once I get enough, I then contact each artist and say, I love your cartoon. I want to display it next year. Is that okay? And guys like Mike Peters thought it was just wonderful that I found this niche, just Frankenstein, and he thought it was great.
Yep. Well, I'm glad you reached out to me years ago, and it's been great to meet you.
Yes.
You're fascinating, and let's keep in touch.
Okay.
And this is I think a great Halloween episode focusing on Frankenstein.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to see your snowman thing that you're doing.
Yeah, I'm hoping it will come out one day. You know how it is with movies. It's so involved getting all the pieces working together.
Yes.
And everything lined up has been up and down, but it's been fun at the same time. So
good.
Anyway, thanks a lot, Ron. I want to say good night to all listeners at the Cartoon Pad. Until next time, hang in there. And happy Halloween. Bye.
Bye.
Ron, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope that was enjoyable for you.